Welcome back to the garden. If you were here last week, you already know something shifted. Maybe you felt it in the episode. Maybe you felt it after. Maybe you found yourself sitting with a question you did not have before. That is not a coincidence. That is your inner garden working. If you are new, welcome. You found this place at exactly the right time. You always do. Last week, we planted the first seed. We talked about what it means to be fragmented, not broken, not damaged beyond repair, not too much or not enough. Fragmented. We talked about what happens when something breaks you, really breaks you, and parts of you scatter to survive. The playful part shuts down. The sensitive part goes underground. The angry part stands guard at the door because something had to defend us from getting wounded again. We talked about soul integration, the ancient, clinical, sacred, lived practice of calling those parts back home, not fixing them, not silencing them, gathering them. And we talked about the 8 C's of internal family systems. The qualities that Dr. Richard Schwartz says are already living inside you, underneath all of the fragmentation. Not something to earn, something to return to. They are calmness, curiosity, compassion, confidence, creativity, courage, clarity, connectedness. Already there, already yours, waiting. But here's what we did not answer last week. How does it happen? How does a person go from wholeness to fragmentation? How does a part of you end up exiled without you even realizing it? How do you lose pieces of yourself so quietly that you spend years wondering why something feels missing, and you cannot explain what it is? That is what this episode is about. And I am not going to answer it with a textbook. We are going to answer it with a story. A story about a girl who was once whole, who carried something bright and tender and wildly alive inside her, who had parts that laughed too loud and talked too much and also felt too much and loved with everything she had. And then, one by one, the world made her ashamed of those parts and asked her to hide them away. You may recognize her. Somewhere inside you, there is a part that lived the same story. A part that is still waiting for someone to come back for it. This season is that return, and it begins right here. Before we meet the girl, I want to tell you something that healers have known for thousands of years. Long before psychology had a word for fragmentation, long before Jung mapped the shadow, long before Freud named the unconscious, long before any clinical framework tried to explain what it feels like to lose pieces of yourself, indigenous healers across every culture on this earth had already mapped it. They called it soul loss. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. In shamanic traditions, the oldest healing traditions on earth, when something happens to a person that is too painful, too overwhelming, too unsurvivable for the whole self to bear, a part of the soul leaves. not because it is weak, because it is wise. The soul fragment does not disappear. It does not die. It goes somewhere safe. It waits. And the person walks forward carrying less of themselves than they started with, functioning, surviving, but somewhere underneath, something feels missing. You may know that feeling, the sense that there is a version of you somewhere that you cannot quite reach, a part of yourself that used to be there, that laughed differently, loved differently, moved through the world with a kind of ease you cannot remember how to find anymore. That is not imagination. That is not nostalgia. That is soul memory. The shamans called the healers who went to retrieve the scattered pieces soul retrievers. Their work was not to fix the person. It was to go into the unseen places, the dark, the underground, the in-between, and call the lost parts home. That is what this season is. Not therapy, not content, a soul retrieval. Before we go into the story, I want you to know what soul loss looks like from the inside, because most people who are living with it do not know it has a name. Soul loss looks like feeling as if you are watching your own life from a distance, like you are present but not fully there, like something is happening but you are slightly outside of it. Soul loss looks like chronic exhaustion that sleep does not fix, a numbness you cannot explain, like going through the motions of a life that should feel like yours but somehow does not. Soul loss looks like sudden disappearance of things that used to bring you joy, the thing you loved as a child that you just stopped doing one day, the part of you that used to sing or draw or run or laugh without self-consciousness, that just quietly went away and you never noticed it leave until it had been gone for years. Soul loss looks like feeling as different versions of yourself at different times, like you cannot find a consistent self to stand in, like whoever you are in this room is not the same that you are in that room, and neither of them feel completely real. Soul loss looks like the persistent feeling that something is missing, even when everything in your life looks fine from the outside. Does any of that sound familiar? If it does, keep listening, because what I am about to tell you is not a diagnosis. It's a soul map. I want to tell you about a girl named Jackie Rose. She was 8 years old, gifted, sensitive, wildly alive. The kind of child who felt everything and hid nothing. The kind of child who asked too many questions and noticed too much and loved with her whole being. A girl living in a home where the foundation was already unsteady, though nobody said it so out loud. She was whole once. And then something happened. Not something anyone would have recognized as a wound from the outside. A truth was spoken that was never meant to be spoken that way. She found out she was adopted, not in a gentle conversation, not in a moment of love and intention, in the way that truths sometimes arrive, sideways from someone who did not understand the weight of what they were saying. She was told that the man who was her abusive, alcoholic father had resentments towards her because she was not his blood. And in that moment, Jackie Rose understood something that 8-year-old children are not supposed to. Everything she had been taught to believe was built on a lie. That the foundation she had been standing on was not what she thought it was. That the story she had been told about herself now had a missing chapter. The shamans would say that was the first tear. The moment a piece of her soul looked at what was happening and left. Not forever, but somewhere safer than here. What remained was a girl who was still functioning, still going to school, still existing inside a home that looked like a safe place from the outside, but carrying something new now. A question underneath everything. If everything she was told was not true, then what else was a lie? She started noticing the contradictions in the Catholic school teachings, in the home that looked stable but was not, in the story that had been narrated for her about who she was and where she came from. And something in Jackie Rose began to rage, quietly at first, then louder. A rage that had not yet been named. A rage that would not have a name for decades. But the rage was not the problem. The rage was the first protector. The first part that stood up and said, something is wrong here, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. In the next episode, we will explore that part. She has a lot to say, and we will honor every word of it. But today, we want you to sit with the 8-year-old, the one who found out the foundation was not what she thought it was. The gifted child who was already beginning to question whether the world was what she had been told it was. That child is not just my story. She is every person who has ever had their foundation pulled out from under them before they knew what was happening. She is the part of you that first learned the world was not as safe as you thought it was. And she is the part that this season is going back for. Here's what the shamans knew that we forgot. Soul loss is not permanent. The fragment does not disappear, it waits. And the work of soul retrieval is not dramatic or violent. It is not about forcing anything back. It is about creating enough safety, enough presence, enough of what we call self-energy, that the scattered part finally feels it is okay to return back to its full essence, wholeness. In the healing traditions that came after the shamans, the psychologists, the clinicians, the researchers, all kept finding the same truth, wearing different clothes. Carl Jung called the protective scattered parts the shadow, the rejected, demonized pieces of self that do not disappear when we push them down. They run the show from there. Freud called it the unconscious, the part of the mind that holds what the conscious self cannot bear to look at directly. Modern trauma research calls it disassociation, the way the mind protects itself by creating distance from what is too painful to integrate. Different languages, same map, same truth. When something happens that the whole self cannot hold, a part leaves, and it takes something with it. In his work on the spirituality of internal family systems, Dr. Schwartz calls what that piece carries a burden, a belief, a wound, a legacy passed down through generations, or through a single shattering moment, such as, I am not enough, I am not safe, I am not wanted, the world cannot be trusted. If I feel this, I will not survive it. The burden is not the truth, but the part carrying it does not know that yet. It has been underground too long, too far from the self that could tell it otherwise. And that is where the retrieval begins. Not with force, not with analysis, not with trying to fix or change or reframe, with return. With someone or some part of yourself going back into the dark and saying, I see you. I know what you have been carrying. I came back for you. You do not have to carry this alone anymore. Before we close today, we want to leave you with something to tend this week. Not a homework assignment, not a checklist, a question to sit with in your own inner garden. What parts of yourself scattered during your hardest seasons? And where do you think they went? You do not have to answer that out loud. You do not have to answer it right now. Just let it find the part of you that knows. Because that part has been waiting for someone to ask. And if something in today's episode resonated with you, if you recognize the part of yourself in Jackie Rose, if you've ever felt the weight of a burden you have been carrying so long, you forgot it was not yours to carry, that is not a wound opening. That is a door. And doors can be walked through. Next week, we dig even deeper. You met Jackie Rose today, the 8-year-old girl, the first tear, the first part of the soul that decided it was not safe to stay. Next week, 4 years pass, and everything gets a little harder. A father dies. A mother makes a choice, and a 12-year-old girl looks around at the world and understands. Nobody is coming to protect me. So she becomes someone who will. That part, the one that rose up in the fire, the one that society calls dangerous and survivors call salvation. Lucia de Lilith gets her episode next week. But before we go there, I want to tell you something about her. Because if you have a part like her, a part that got loud when quiet did not work, a part that burned bridges and pushed people away just to make sure nobody could hurt you, you may have spent a long time calling that part your enemy. In episode 3, we are going to look at what Carl Jung knew about that part, the shadow, the demonized, rejected piece of self that does not disappear when you push it down. It protects you from there. Jung said something that changed everything for me when I finally found the words. He said, the shadow is not your darkness. It is your unlived life. Come back to our garden next Saturday. Bring the part of you that has been called too much. Bring the part that got loud. Bring the part you have been trying to fix. Because our garden was built for exactly that part. And your guides will be here waiting. Gypsy, the sensitive part that kept the shimmer alive through everything. She will show you what it looks like when the exiled part finally gets to come home and play and feel safe. Lucia, the fierce part that rose up in the fire when nothing else would. She will show you what it looks like when the shadow stops being the enemy and becomes the protector. Issa Rose, the integrated self, holding all parts without choosing between them. She will show you what it looks like on the other side of gathering. 3 parts, 1 integrated self. Your guides through the garden. Walking this self-exploration journey with you, not ahead of you, alongside you. Because the journey to wholeness is not walked alone. Enter through whichever door feels most familiar. If you have not yet read the origin story at sproutfromdarkness.com, go visit our garden. Jackie Rose is there, waiting to introduce herself. Also, explore Lens 1, Shamanic Wisdom and Soul Retrieval on the framework page, and visit Gathered Fragments to see this week's blog. If today resonated with you and you're ready to tend your inner garden, the free 7-day Soul Retrieval Journal is waiting for you in the shop. May this be your sacred yes to yourself. The garden is holding you. The roots are steady, and the parts that scattered, they know you are coming, and they are waiting. With roots and reverence, petals and thorns, this is Sprouted Reflections of Issa Rose.